Hey guys, tonight we walk into the brutal, cold arena of emotion, not to vent, not to express, but to conquer. You're sitting alone in a quiet room, staring at your phone, fingers twitching to type a paragraph she'll probably ignore, your jaws tight, your chest burns. You were just tested, mocked, dismissed, left unread, and the urge to show her is overwhelming. But here's the raw truth. If you respond from that storm, you lose, every time. Not because you're wrong, but because you are no longer in control of the one thing that defines a man in the wild and in civilization, your inner state. She's watching you closely. Not for flowers, not for poems, but for cracks, for signals, for weakness. And your greatest weapon isn't the right text, or the perfect comeback, or a louder voice. It's the absence of reaction, the kind that leaves her asking, how is he not affected? That's where respect begins, and where most men fall. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your location and time in the comments. I want to know who else is awake tonight, untangling himself from his emotions. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You remember the last time you exploded, don't you? She said something careless, or maybe it wasn't even what she said, it was the way she said it. Cold, dismissive, like you didn't matter. And something ancient rose up in you, a heat, a surge. You snapped. You argued. You raised your voice. Maybe you walked out and slammed the door like a character in a low-budget romance movie, and for a second, it felt powerful. Until it didn't. Because what followed was a familiar silence, not a respectful silence, but a flat, disconnected one. She didn't lean in, she didn't apologize, she didn't admire your fire. She backed away, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, and you could feel it. Again, that's what no one tells you when they say be yourself. That yourself might be emotionally immature, impulsive, and tragically untrained. Here's the reality, you won't hear from your therapist, your mom, or your favorite rom-com. Emotional expression is not always strength. Sometimes, it's the very opposite. It's a leak, a rupture, a signal to her nervous system that you are not safe, not because you'll hurt her, but because you can't hold her. And a man who cannot hold himself, cannot hold her. Women feel it viscerally, not through logic, through biology. You see, long before women had laws to protect them, they had instincts. She had to know if the man beside her was a shelter or a storm. That legacy still lives in her bones. And when you erupt over a delayed text or a subtle test, her body flinches, not because you're too much, but because you've become unpredictable. A philosopher once said, if you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them. That wasn't Tony Robbins, that was Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome, a man who could order executions, command legions, and still chose to sit in silence while chaos bloomed around him. Compare that to how you react when she doesn't reply fast enough. But let's not lie, you weren't taught this. You were taught one of two things: be a nice guy trademark, share your feelings, cry when you need to. Communicate every emotion like it's your duty. Women love vulnerability, right? Be a stonewall. Bottle everything up until you either die young or explode in a divorce lawyer's office. Both options are traps, because real emotional mastery is not repression, and it's not expression, it's containment. Imagine a dam, behind it thousands of gallons of violent churning water. Now imagine the dam cracking. That's your outburst. It floods everything, her emotions, your dignity, the entire relationship. But when the dam holds, when it redirects that pressure into power, that's when cities get electricity. That's you, or rather, that's who you're becoming. And becoming that man starts in the micro moments. When you feel the heat rise, when your stomach flips, when your chest tightens, when she tests you, when your ego screams to be heard. In that moment, you don't punch a wall, you don't type an essay, you don't raise your voice, you pause, you breathe, you let it pass, and when it does, you respond, not for her but for you. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some neuroscientists believe it takes only 90 seconds for an emotion to fully pass through the body, if you don't fuel it with thought. 90 seconds. But what do most men do? They rehearse the insult. They script the comeback. They imagine confrontations that never happen. And now that 90 seconds becomes 3 days of chaos. But if you just sit still, literally, physically still, you begin to rewire yourself. Because masculinity isn't shown in the outburst, it's revealed in what you don't say. There's a reason Stoic warriors in every culture were trained not just with swords but with silence. Samurai, monks, Roman soldiers, they were all taught the same principle: control your breath, control your body, control your body, control your world. Why? Because the man who cannot control his own breath cannot be trusted in battle. And make no mistake, your relationship, your career, your reputation, every one of them is a battlefield, and you're not a child anymore. Remember that scholars debate. There's still disagreement about whether emotions are natural responses or socially programmed reactions, whether we're hardwired to react or just conditioned to believe it's normal. But here's the good news. Either way, you can unlearn it. You can choose new defaults. You can replace the panic with poise. Not because you're pretending, but because you've finally grown into the man she can't shake. Because the quiet man, the truly quiet one, not the sulking one, is terrifying, not in a cruel way, in a gravitational way. He makes people lean in, he makes women rethink, he makes disrespect feel impossible. And this is where it gets fun, because the more coldly you master your emotions, not with anger, but with absence, the more she feels magnetized. She doesn't need you to argue. She needs to feel your depth, not through noise, but through your refusal to be moved. That's what the Stoics knew, and that's what you'll learn next. You walk with Marcus Aurelius now, not in some temple, not in a library, but through your daily storm, through unread texts, double taps from other men on her photos, passive-aggressive remarks that slip into your dinner conversation, like poison dressed in velvet. And Marcus doesn't speak much. He just watches. Stoic, regal, not detached like a ghost, anchored like a mountain, because he's seen worse than you. Plots, betrayals, plagues. And still, the man ruled one of the greatest empires on earth with a pen, not a sword. So what does he teach you? That everything begins inside. You used to think power was force. Now you start to realize, power is the man who doesn't need to react, who chooses his response with surgical precision, and who holds his frame so tight that the world bends to it, without him ever raising his voice. This emperor, this philosopher king, woke up every morning and wrote a journal to himself, not to impress, not to publish, but to train, to remind his mind of what it already knew but kept forgetting. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Sounds poetic, right? But try it when she's flirting with chaos. Try it when she pulls back emotionally, or gives you the cold shoulder in bed. Try it when she says, "I just need space," with that look that already feels like goodbye. That's where you either become the emperor, or you collapse like a child. So tonight you sit with Marcus. You study the way he separates judgment from event. The thing happened. She said what she said, but that alone didn't hurt you. What hurt you was the narrative you spun. She doesn't respect me. She's cheating. I'm not good enough. That's where your pain was born. Not in reality, but in your commentary. Imagine if you removed the commentary. Suddenly her silence is just silence. Her distance is just space. Her test is just information. Now you're not spiraling. You're observing. See how quiet that becomes. Here's a mainstream fact that explains why it works. Your brain has a tiny part called the amygdala, the emotional smoke alarm. It sets off the fight or flight response the moment something feels off. A tone, a look, a phrase. But the more you observe without judgment, the more your prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, steps in to regulate, like a wise general taming a drunk soldier. Marcus knew this before neuroscience confirmed it. He trained his soldiers, his servants, and especially himself, to view every insult as a test of sovereignty, not to suppress anger, but to question its necessity. Is this within my control? He would ask. If yes, act. If no, release. Simple, brutal, freeing. You begin to wonder what would happen if you lived this way, not occasionally, not when you felt like it, but as a discipline, like a soldier on guard against his own weakness. You wake up, you journal, not about your feelings, but about what you can control, your schedule, your breath, your posture, your tone. You walk into rooms like Marcus, grounded, quiet, observant. You speak slower, you smile less, not because you're sad, but because your energy is no longer leaking in every direction. You're conserving it, like heat in a steel vault. Women notice, they feel it, because the average man is loud, flinching, easily provoked, and when you become the opposite, you disturb something deep in her instincts, not fear, but awareness, curiosity, deference. You're not performing Stoicism, you are it. And here's a quirky tidbit. Marcus wasn't born wise. He hated politics. He was shy. He preferred reading to ruling. But he was chosen, and the man who chose him, Emperor Hadrian, saw something in him most people missed: the potential to rule not others, but himself. And that's what's happening to you. You were chosen by suffering, by rejection, by humiliation. All those unfair moments, they're not curses, they're your Hadrian. They're shaping you into the man who cannot be shaken. Philosophers still argue whether Marcus Aurelius was truly a Stoic in the purest sense, or just a Roman trying to survive court politics with some wisdom attached. But it doesn't matter, because the man left behind a roadmap for every modern man lost in his own reactions. And tonight, you follow that roadmap. Step 1. Observe every emotion like weather. Don't deny the rain, just don't blame it. Step 2. Reframe pain as a teacher. Ask, what is this trying to show me? Step 3. Separate signal from noise. Her words are one thing, your story about them is another. Step 4. Choose the most honorable response available, and then walk away from the outcome, even if that outcome is her walking away from you. Because here's the paradox. Women respect men, they can't emotionally destabilize. It's not cruel, it's comforting. When you stay calm, you give her nervous system a home, a harbor, and if she's worthy, she'll melt into it. If she's not, she'll rage against it. Either way, you win. You're not trying to win her, you're trying to win you back. That's the Stoic blueprint. It starts every morning, with breath, with stillness, with reminding yourself that the woman is not the problem. The world is not the problem. Your undisciplined mind is the problem. But it won't be for long, because now you're writing your own meditations. Every day you respond instead of react. Every time you hold still while the world burns. Every moment you say nothing when she expects a storm. You are becoming something she cannot ignore. Not cold, not distant, but deeply, quietly unshakable, like Marcus. You sit across from her now. She's not yelling. Not exactly. But every sentence has a blade tucked inside. She's just being honest, which means she's pulling apart your confidence like it's an old threadbare sweater, critiquing your tone, your timing, the way you looked at her wrong when she told her story at dinner. You feel your stomach clench. You want to interrupt, defend, say, that's not fair, but instead, you pause. You remember Seneca, not Seneca the city, Seneca the mind surgeon, a man who lived under Nero, one of the most unstable tyrants in history, a man who could be executed for blinking the wrong way. And yet, Seneca survived, not by cowering, not by people-pleasing, but by mastering the art of non-reaction. Tonight, you learn his blade, not to cut her, but to carve out your own clarity, because Seneca didn't write about calm for fun. He wrote about it under threat. The kind of calm that keeps your pulse level while the woman in front of you spirals into emotional warfare, and your only weapon is stillness. This is where most men fail. You think arguing will earn her understanding. You think a logical breakdown will win the point. But the more you explain, the more she tightens the noose. Not because she hates you, because she needs to feel you are unshakable. So what does Seneca teach you? That anger is a choice. Always. No man is made angry by another. He is only shown what was already boiling within. Let that sink in. She can't make you angry. She only shows you what you haven't dealt with. And when you realize that, something inside you flips. You stop trying to win the moment and start trying to win yourself. Because Seneca's razor is this: cut away the unnecessary, not just stuff, reactions, the need to be right, the need to be validated, the need to have the last word. You don't need the last word. You need the final presence. So you sit there, calm as stone, not passive, not submissive, just rooted. You breathe deeper. You lower your voice. You don't raise your eyebrows. You blink slowly. You pause longer. And what happens? The room shifts. Her voice changes. Her eyes flinch. Her body stutters. Because you didn't engage the drama. You absorbed it like water into rock. And now she feels her own storm. That's the moment she begins to respect you again. Not because you beat her, but because you refuse to play her game. And this isn't manipulation. It's leadership. It's spiritual composure. It's masculine authority, without a single raised voice. A study in behavioral psychology once found that mirror neurons in the brain cause people to unconsciously mimic the emotional states of those around them. This is why a calm man in a chaotic environment cools the room. He becomes the thermostat, not the thermometer. Seneca would have loved that. He believed a wise man was like a flame that doesn't flicker in the wind, that no insult, no woman, no emperor could throw him off center, because his emotions were his, not public property. Now let's talk tactics. Here's what non-reaction actually looks like in a relationship. She texts, "We need to talk," and you don't spiral. You reply, "Cool, let's do it in person." Calm, clear, no panic. She accuses you of not caring. You don't list 10 counter-arguments. You look at her, steady, and say, "That's not true, and I'm not going to defend myself with noise." She storms out. You don't chase. You don't send a string of texts. You wait, like a mountain waits for the rain to pass. The less you chase, the more she feels your gravity. And yes, this makes you terrifying in the best way, because women are used to men reacting, explaining, defending, pleading. You don't do that. You stay still, and in that stillness, you give her 2 options: elevate or exit. Both outcomes serve your peace. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. Seneca wasn't just a philosopher, he was also a playwright. And in his tragedies, he wrote characters who lost everything because they couldn't control their emotions. Kings who killed lovers, warriors who burned cities, all because of one bad reaction. And then he'd contrast them with the man who sat, hands folded, watching chaos without flinching. That's you now. The modern man loses not because he's weak, but because he believes every emotional twitch deserves a response. Every jab needs a comeback. Every sigh means something deep. No, sometimes she's just testing to see if you'll fold, and when you don't, she feels it in her bones. Philosophers still debate whether Seneca's calm was authentic or strategic. Was he truly stoic or just politically clever? But again, it doesn't matter, because the effect is the same. The man who doesn't react rules the room, including the room where love lives. So what happens next? You start testing yourself. Not when it's easy, but when you're triggered, when you're insulted, when she says the exact thing that used to send you off. You treat it like training, like resistance. She says you don't care, and instead of defending, you breathe. You feel the insult land and die. She pulls back, and you stay present, not clingy, not distant, just immovable. She goes silent, and you let her, without punishment, without fear, without reward. Now you're not just a man, you're a container, a temple, a storm shelter, and in that stillness, something deeper than attraction is born: devotion. She may not say it, but her body softens, her tone shifts, her tests reduce, because cold isn't cruel, cold is controlled. And women don't respect men who manage emotions, they respect men who command them. You are becoming that man, not with force, not with anger, with the blade of Seneca. You wake up to a dull weight in your chest. Not depression, Not dread. Just pressure. A quiet coil of frustration that has no name yet. Maybe it's her tone from last night. Maybe it's the way she didn't kiss you goodbye. Maybe it's nothing. But your body remembers it, even when your brain tries to move on. That's the problem with being a man. You're trained to ignore subtle emotional shifts until they turn into storms. You think you're calm, but you're simmering. And by the time you explode, you've already lost the battle. Tonight, you dissect that simmer. You turn the blade inward and investigate why your emotional responses come faster than your awareness. Spoiler, it's not just culture, it's biology. Inside you is a legacy written in hormones, war, and survival. You didn't evolve to process emotions, you evolved to react to threats. Fast, visceral, violent. Your ancient brain doesn't know the difference between a tiger in the jungle and a woman saying, "Maybe we're not compatible." Both feel like existential danger. Both activate your amygdala, the same part of your brain that lights up in car crashes and bar fights. And so you react. Not because you're weak, but because you're wired to preserve your status, your role, your identity. And when someone, especially a woman, challenges it, your body interprets that as a threat to your life. That's where the tremor begins, and it happens in milliseconds. That's why you interrupt her, why you clench your fists, why you suddenly start breathing faster, even when you swear you're calm. It's not psychological, it's physiological, and it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. This is where the Stoics outpace modern therapy. They weren't interested in your childhood wounds. They were interested in your discipline. You don't need to trace every reaction back to age 7. You need to seize the moment before the explosion. Marcus Aurelius trained for this daily. He called emotions the little tyrants. Not evil, not bad, just impatient kings trying to hijack your soul. And his strategy? Delay. He would pause, in silence, in solitude, in stillness. Because between the spark and the flame lies your freedom. There's a mainstream psychology concept called the refractory period, that post-trigger phase where your brain temporarily cannot access rational thought. When you're flooded with adrenaline or cortisol, your IQ drops, literally. Blood drains from your frontal lobe. You can't think clearly. You become temporarily dumber and more dangerous to yourself. But here's the key. That state only lasts 60 to 90 seconds, unless you feed it. If you can sit with the heat for 1 full minute, without acting, without speaking, you win. Every single time. This is where mastery begins. Let her throw her tests. Let the email arrive late. Let your friend betray you. Feel it rise. Feel the fire. But don't move. Not out of fear, out of strength. Because a man who can hold his nervous system without lashing out is rarer than gold, and more magnetic than 6-pack abs and 10-figure bank accounts combined. Why? Because everyone is reactive now. Rage is the default setting. Social media trains it. Childhood trauma hardwires it. Relationships expose it. But the man who pauses, who breathes, who lowers his heart rate on command, he becomes alien, unreadable, and therefore irresistible. Let's take a detour. Did you know the samurai used to practice something called mokuso before battle? It was a silent meditation, a ritual to regulate breath, still the heart, and clear the mind, not to calm down, but to gain clarity. They'd stare into the void until their ego dissolved, and only awareness remained. Then, and only then, would they draw their blade. You are now practicing your own mokuso, not with incense or robes, but with silence, in your car, after a fight, with stillness, as you stand at the sink replaying her words, with breath, as you lie in bed next to her silence. And in that stillness, you don't dissolve, you crystallize. That's what emotional control is, not a performance, but a posture. She feels it before she sees it. A shift in your energy, your breath slows, your eyes sharpen, your body language softens without collapsing. You are no longer in the argument. You are observing the weather inside you. And this scares her a little. Not because you're dangerous, but because you've become sovereign. She can't find the edges of your mood anymore. She can't locate your buttons. And so, slowly, respectfully, she drops her weapons too. Psychologists still debate whether men are truly more emotionally explosive than women, or whether society simply condemns male emotions differently. But here's what they all agree on. Emotions expressed without awareness destroy trust. That includes trust in yourself. So you rebuild it, not with affirmations, not with apologies, but with containment. That word again, because containment doesn't mean bottling. It means choosing the time and place to release. And if you're smart, you'll rarely need to, because the woman who once screamed, "Why don't you react?" will now whisper, "How are you so calm?" And you'll smile, not arrogantly, not seductively, just knowingly. Because now you know her storm is not yours to sail, it is yours to witness. And when she trusts that you won't abandon ship, not physically, not emotionally, and not spiritually, she starts handing you the wheel. Now you're leading, without yelling, without scolding, without even speaking. That's the Stoic game. It begins in your biology, but it ends in your silence. And tonight, you start playing for real. You stand at the edge of a moment. Not a dramatic one, no screaming, no shattered plates. Just a small sentence muttered under her breath as she walks past. "Wow, you really don't care, do you?" It's the kind of phrase that used to flip your switch, a well-aimed dagger forged in old childhood wounds. The temptation to bite back rises in your throat like bile. But now, you pause. You remember what Seneca said, what Marcus whispered in the fire, and instead of reacting, you reach into that narrow, sacred crack between stimulus and response, the hidden chamber where every powerful man lives, and you wait. Because tonight you learn the most uncomfortable truth of emotional self-mastery. You are not your first reaction. Your first reaction is the boy, the raw nerve, the unfinished animal, the orphaned instinct. But the man is the second response, the delayed response, the chosen response. He doesn't emerge from instinct, he emerges from intention. You don't deny the first reaction, you study it. You say, "Ah, there you are again." The urge to defend, to lash, to correct, the old familiar shadow, but you don't follow it. You escort it gently out the back door of your psyche. That's how emotional mastery is built. Not in grand moments, in tiny betrayals of the old self. Here's a mainstream insight to anchor it. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is built on a core principle, that your thoughts, not your circumstances, create your feelings. And the moment you learn to observe your thoughts instead of believing them, you begin to reclaim control. Now add Stoicism to that. If thoughts create emotions, and you choose your thoughts, then emotions are no longer dictators. They are disciples, but only if you train them. Tonight, that training deepens. You start to notice your patterns, not in hindsight, in real time. You hear yourself beginning to justify. Pause. You feel your hands twitch when she rolls her eyes. Breathe. You feel the temperature rise in your chest. Lower your shoulders, and slowly, the neural pathways begin to shift. Because here's the quirky truth neuroscience discovered. Your brain doesn't care what's true, it just reinforces what you repeat. If you always react with anger, the brain builds a highway for that rage. But if you pause, if you redirect, new paths form, new defaults, and eventually, new identity. You're not becoming fake, you're becoming formidable. And the first signal of your new self is this: you don't explain your emotions anymore, you feel them, fully, but you don't narrate them to everyone who triggers you. You no longer say, "I'm just upset," because you say nothing, because you know something most men never learn. Explaining emotions to someone who doesn't care is emotional self-harm. She's not always asking to understand, she's sometimes asking to see if you'll collapse trying to be understood. That's the test. And when you don't fall for it, when you let the comment hang in the air, untouched, unbothered, she feels it, a shift. It's not coldness, it's containment. Let's pause here and be clear. This isn't about becoming robotic or emotionally distant or the caricature of a strong silent type. That's not masculine, that's wounded. No, this is about becoming the kind of man who owns his state so deeply that even he doesn't rush to make sense of it. Sometimes you don't know why you're angry, sometimes you don't need to, you just need to hold it until it passes, and it always passes. Let me give you something ancient to anchor this. The Stoics had a concept called apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from unhealthy passion. It meant being so rooted in reason that destructive emotions could not control you. It wasn't numbness, it was poise, like a lion in the sun, muscles ready, breath steady, eyes scanning, not tense, but composed. That's who you are now. You don't clench anymore. You don't chase. You don't chase her approval, or your father's ghost, or the fantasy of being fully understood. You chase nothing. And because of that, you attract everything. Psychologists still debate whether true detachment is healthy in relationships, whether emotional restraint creates trust or erodes it. But they all agree on this: unregulated emotion destroys intimacy. The unfiltered reaction, the yelling, the wall punching, the sulking, all of it erodes safety, and women need safety more than they need you to open up. Let that sink in. Now, you begin to feel the shift inside your own bones. You no longer feel compelled to prove yourself. She tests you, and you pass by not reacting. She withholds, and you remain full. She compares, and you don't compete, because the real you, the new you, is not a puppet pulled by emotional strings. You are the puppeteer. You watch your emotions rise like waves, but you don't surf them anymore. You watch them crest, and crash, and vanish, and in their place, silence, not empty silence, powerful silence. And now, she sees you, really sees you, not the boy, the man who responds second, because the first reaction is noise, but the second response, that's signal, that's mastery, that's you. You sit on the edge of the bed. She's curled up, scrolling, a wall between you made of nothing but silence and the weight of things unsaid. You used to fear these moments, the emotional disconnect, the quiet tension, the invisible dare. Do you care enough to fight for this? And in the past you did. You'd lean in, ask if she's okay, try to pull her out, try to make her feel loved, try to make her feel you. But tonight, you don't, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've stopped proving. Welcome to the most controversial truth Stoicism has to offer. Not every emotion deserves a voice. Let me say it again, slower. Not every emotion deserves a voice. We've been told otherwise, that good relationships are built on constant emotional expression, that real men share how they feel, that communication is key, and sometimes it is, but not always. Because what the culture won't tell you is that venting is often disguised addiction, an addiction to relief, to being seen, to avoiding your own aloneness by making someone else hold your feelings for you. But when you stop doing that, when you stop bleeding on her just to feel better, she notices, and respect begins to grow. Tonight, you take a hard look at the myth of expressing yourself. The idea that you owe your partner your every mood, your every insecurity, your every emotional sneeze. Let's go deeper. Modern pop psychology loves to tell you that bottling emotions is dangerous, that men who don't talk about their feelings implode, that silence is the path to sickness. And yes, suppression can be toxic, but suppression is not containment. Suppression is pretending nothing's wrong while grinding your teeth in your sleep. Containment is choosing not to share, because sharing won't help either of you. Suppression is denial. Containment is discipline. Suppression is weakness in a tuxedo. Containment is strength wearing silence like a crown. The difference is ownership. Here's a mainstream psychological study to consider. Researchers found that couples who over-process emotional events often report lower long-term satisfaction than those who allow space and reflection before communication. In other words, talking through everything immediately doesn't always lead to closeness. It can lead to burnout, because sometimes the act of explaining your pain keeps you stuck in it. It reactivates it. reframes it, makes it your identity. But when you hold it in silence, it softens, it breathes, it passes, and in that passing your clarity returns. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Stoics had a saying, "Let your response be like a clean blade, brief, sharp, and only drawn when needed." They believed verbosity diluted truth, that words like weapons should be sheathed most of the time. So imagine your emotions now as weapons. Every time you swing them, tears, rants, breakdowns, you dull the edge. But when you wait, when you observe, when you choose when to speak, every word becomes a sword. And the room leans in, especially her, because she doesn't want to carry your chaos. She wants to feel your center. The strongest men are not the loudest about their pain. They are the ones who transmute it into strength, into stillness, into wisdom. You don't need to tell her everything. You need to become a man who could, but rarely needs to. That's mystery. That's magnetism. That's Stoic masculinity. And now you understand why the ancient world respected restraint more than expression. Because expression can be bought. It can be faked. It can be exaggerated. But restraint is proof. Proof that you've trained your body not to leak every emotional impulse. Proof that you don't need a witness to validate your struggle. Proof that you can face the fire alone and come back clean. Let's test this. Next time she provokes you gently or harshly, you ask yourself, does speaking serve the moment or just my ego? And if the answer is ego, you stay quiet, not cold, just unavailable for drama, not numb, just unwilling to betray your peace for temporary validation. And what happens? She gets louder at first. She pokes harder. Say something. And you don't. You look at her, not with scorn, not with pity, with presence. That kind of presence that says, I've felt everything, and I choose not to bleed on you today. Now the power shifts. Because now, she has to sit with her own storm, and the room changes. You've given her something rare, a man who does not use emotion as a bargaining chip. No guilt, no passive aggression, just clarity. Because if she's earned your truth, you'll give it. Calm, measured, late even. But if she hasn't, you say nothing. That's not punishment. It's sovereignty. And sovereignty is the opposite of reactivity. Psychologists still argue whether emotional honesty is always beneficial in relationships or whether boundaries around expression actually foster more security. But in your case, the evidence is already showing. The less you explain, the more she leans in, not because you're manipulative, because you're centered, and she trusts that, even when she doesn't like it, because deep down she doesn't want your full emotional download. She wants to know you're strong enough to carry it, without turning her into your therapist, your mother, or your punching bag. And when you do that, when you learn to feel deeply without the compulsive need to share immediately, you've entered rare air. You've become dangerous, in the best possible way. She pushes you again tonight. Not with fists, with subtleties, with pauses, with glances that last half a second too long, with phrases like, do whatever you want, or it's fine, said in a tone that clearly means the opposite. And something primal stirs inside you. That urge to react, to confront, to correct, to defend. But you stop, not because you're scared, but because you finally understand the game. It's not war, it's a test. And most men fail it. Not because they're bad men, but because they misread it. They think they're under attack. But she's not attacking. She's auditioning you. Tonight, you begin to decode one of the deepest truths about masculine-feminine dynamics. Her emotional chaos is not a threat. It's a question. The question is always the same. Can you hold this? Her stress? Can you hold it? Her silence? Can you hold it? Her anger? Her sadness? Her tears? Her mood swings? Can you hold those too? Not solve, not explain, not fix. Hold. That's what she's asking for. Beneath the drama, beneath the words. Can you stay grounded while she spins? Can you hold the container while she floods? Can you remain the riverbank while she thrashes like water against it? That's what the Stoics trained for. Not relationships, specifically, but life, which is a much harsher woman. And Marcus Aurelius said, when jarred unavoidably by circumstance, revert at once to yourself, and don't lose the rhythm more than you can help. He was talking about politics, but he might as well have been talking about pillow fights disguised as arguments. You're being tested, brother. But it's not a test of knowledge, it's a test of nervous system mastery. When she snaps, "Why didn't you text me back earlier?" Don't answer her tone, answer her fear. When she sighs and turns her back in bed, don't chase the silence, breathe into your presence. When she flirts with jealousy games, don't match chaos with chaos, just watch. Because now you realize, most emotional tests are unconscious invitations for you to show her who you are when she's unsure of who she is. If you crumble, she panics. If you rage, she shrinks. If you plead, she retreats. But if you remain still, if you stay grounded, if you respond with nothing but certainty, her nervous system relaxes, because she's not looking for perfection, she's looking for polarity. The Stoics never studied dating psychology, but they understood polarity better than any pickup artist alive. They knew that opposites stabilize the world. Fire needs containment, wind needs mountains, emotion needs form. That's the masculine, form, and you are now form incarnate. Let's go deeper. The feminine tests you because it is attracted to strength, and the only way to find strength is to apply pressure. She's not testing your intellect. She's testing your capacity to remain. This is why the nice guy fails. He believes her words are literal. He tries to fix, explain, correct, but she doesn't want correctness. She wants clarity. She wants to feel that when the world pulls her in 5 directions, you don't move. That when she's drowning in her own emotion, you are the air. That when she's spiraling, you don't get dizzy too. That's rare. That's masculine. That's attractive. Here's a quirky fact from evolutionary psychology. Women's nervous systems are designed to detect instability faster than men's. It was essential for survival when they had to choose protectors for themselves and future children. So when your energy gets shaky, she feels it. When you get reactive, she sees it. And when you hold your ground, she softens, even if she's mad about it. Even if she throws one last insult to see if it's real. Even if she walks away just to see if you'll follow. And when you don't flinch, don't chase, don't break, she feels something no nice guy ever made her feel. Safety, not safety, like softness. Safety like steel, because when a woman feels your frame, your real, energetic, emotional, masculine frame, she can finally exhale. Not because you fixed her, not because you agreed with her, because you held the line. That's the real game. And yes, it will cost you. It will cost your ego. It will cost your addiction to being understood. It will cost the old self that begged for approval with every look, every apology, every emotional outburst. But in exchange, you become her mirror. She sees herself in your stillness. She confronts her storm in your silence. And if she's ready for a real man, she rises to meet you. If she's not, she falls away. Either way, you remain. Because her tests are not about her. They're about you. And now that you've passed them, you'll never go back to chasing emotional validation. You don't need her to be calm. You don't need her to approve. You don't need her to apologize first. Because your power is no longer dependent on her mood. And that, my brother, is what makes her respect you. You walk into the room. She's waiting. Eyes narrow, jaw slightly clenched, arms crossed. Not in anger, but anticipation. You've been here before. This is the confrontation. The moment she expects a response, a rebuttal, a rise, but you don't rise. You remain still. And in that stillness, something unnerves her. It's not indifference. It's not cruelty. It's not weakness. It's stillness. The kind of stillness that terrifies. Tonight you learn why. Stillness, true stillness, is the most disruptive force a man can carry. Not because it dominates, but because it reflects. Stillness is a mirror, and most people, especially in relationships, don't want to see themselves. They want your reactivity to prove their righteousness. They want your rage to validate their victimhood. They want your defensiveness to confirm their fears. But when you give them nothing, when you just stand there, watching, breathing, unmoved, you give them back the only thing they weren't prepared to face, themselves. That's the secret. Stoicism has kept hidden in plain sight. When you become still, you become dangerous, because you're no longer easy to read. You're no longer a puppet. You're no longer predictable. She doesn't know what you're thinking, and that mystery, that undisturbed presence, it flips the polarity. Now she's reaching, now she's wondering, now she's navigating your emotional terrain. Let me give you something from the wild. In animal behavior studies, dominance isn't just shown through barking, biting, or puffing up. It's shown through unflinching eye contact, through calm body posture, through the refusal to chase or retreat. Predators don't flail. They wait, they observe, they own the space, and the prey panics, moves, reacts. This isn't about predator and prey in dating, but it is about energy. You've become the one who no longer flinches first. You've become the one who lets others fill the silence. That silence is not awkward anymore. It's holy, and the woman in front of you feels it. She tries again. You clearly don't care. You look at her, pause, breathe, say nothing. Or maybe, just maybe, you say, "That's your story. I won't argue with it." And then silence again. What happens next is up to her. She may soften, she may rage, she may leave the room, but she won't forget the feeling, because for the first time you didn't match her mood. You didn't dance with the drama. You remained, and in that remaining, she was forced to meet herself. Here's something scholars still debate. Was the Stoics' ideal of emotional detachment sustainable? Was it too cold, too ascetic for human relationship? Or was it the only way to maintain dignity in a world that thrives on chaos? The answer, of course, depends on the man. But for you, this isn't about renouncing emotion. It's about mastering its application. You still feel, you still care, you still hurt, but you no longer broadcast it. You no longer place it on the altar of approval. You carry it like a sword you rarely unsheath. Here's a quirky example from history. When Marcus Aurelius lost his children, several of them in fact, he wrote not a tear-stained memoir, but a passage to himself. Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight. He didn't deny the pain, he just refused to be ruled by it. That's where you are now. You don't deny that she's disappointed. You don't deny that she may pull away, but you refuse to chase emotional closure, because closure is a luxury of those who don't yet trust their own silence. And your silence, it's becoming legendary. People feel it before you enter a room. Women feel it before you speak. It's not emptiness, it's depth. And in a world drowning in noise, that depth is intoxicating. But here's the truth no one warns you about. Stillness makes people uncomfortable. They'll call you distant. They'll say you don't care. They'll accuse you of being emotionally unavailable. Let them, because the man who owns his stillness doesn't argue with projection. He doesn't rush to prove he's a good guy. He just continues to move through the world like a storm in reverse, pulling everything toward him, not with sound but with presence. You're becoming that storm, quiet, immovable, necessary. And the woman who once tested you with fire now stands in your silence, unsure whether to speak, because you've shown her something rare. Not a man who resists her, a man who doesn't need her to validate his control. You've become the mirror, and in that mirror, she sees herself. You no longer fight the storm, you study it. Tonight, she's moody, passive-aggressive, distant, maybe even flirting with another man, just enough for you to notice, not enough to call it out. Before, this would have driven you mad. You'd react, confront, panic. You'd let the storm inside you mirror hers, because that's what you thought strength was, showing her you care, showing her you're hurt. But now, you do nothing, not because you're afraid to lose her, because you finally understand the difference between reactivity and strategy. Tonight, Machiavelli enters the room. Yes, that Machiavelli, the man they called manipulative, cold, cunning. But if you read him closely, especially the prince, you'll find something deeper, something most modern men desperately need. How to act, not react. How to control the frame. How to become the author of the moment, not a casualty of it. You watch her behavior like a chessboard now. You don't try to win every move. You try to win the game, because reactivity is emotional checkers. Strategy is emotional chess. And chess masters don't panic when a pawn is taken. They smile. They tighten the plan. They prepare checkmate. You've become that master. Let's break it down. She gives you attitude. You don't escalate. You don't explain. You ask one simple question in a low, centered voice. Is this how you want to talk to me right now? And then silence. She'll either soften or double down. If she softens, you lead the energy back to calm. If she doubles down, you do the unthinkable. You exit the conversation. Not with drama, not with threats. Just, we'll try again later. I'm not doing this with you. And you leave the room, or end the call, or stop texting. That's strategic control, not to punish her, to preserve your sovereignty, to remind her, and yourself, that you will not be emotionally blackmailed into a reactive state. Now, you're not cold, you're disciplined, and women feel the difference, because there's a secret rule to attraction. She tests to feel your power, she disrespects to feel your boundary. Most men beg to be understood. You don't. You establish reality with calm clarity, and then remove your attention if it's not respected. That silence, that absence, it speaks louder than any monologue, because now, she has to adjust. She has to wonder, did I go too far? She has to reflect, and if she doesn't, she disqualifies herself from your peace. Let's anchor this in psychology. There's a concept called intermittent reinforcement, where inconsistent reward patterns make behaviors stronger. In relationships, this shows up when you reward bad behavior with emotional attention. She withdraws, you chase. She criticizes, you explain. She disrespects, you argue. You're rewarding her chaos with your presence. But Machiavelli and modern behavioral psychology both agree, the fastest way to extinguish toxic behavior is to refuse to feed it. Now, you reward calm with closeness. You reward respect with affection. But you withdraw from disrespect without punishment, without collapse, just stillness. That's how you train her nervous system to respect your boundary. Not by telling her what to do, by being unmovable when she forgets who you are. Here's a quirky detail. Machiavelli once wrote that a prince must learn to be both lion and fox. The lion for strength, the fox for cunning. That's you now. You don't just endure her storm, you outmaneuver it. Not with manipulation, with mastery. And mastery means you never reward disrespect. You don't engage during emotional chaos. You remain neutral, not nasty. You exit calmly when the energy gets toxic, because reactivity is cheap. Any man can yell, any man can threaten, any man can sulk or cry or beg or rage. But strategy, that takes power. Power most men never develop because they think their feelings entitle them to control the moment. But your feelings don't give you power. Your control over them does. And that's what she sees now. A man who feels, yes, but who never lets those feelings drive the car. You're learning to say, I hear you, but I won't match that energy. You're learning to say, you're allowed to feel what you feel. I'm allowed to protect my peace. You're learning to say, nothing at all, because sometimes the most strategic move is to let silence speak. Philosophers still argue whether Machiavelli's philosophy creates emotional distance in relationships or whether it creates true leadership through boundaries. But for you, the answer is already showing itself. She no longer controls the rhythm of the room. You do, not with dominance, with discipline, with detachment, with presence, because the man who can walk away calmly is the man she'll chase for a lifetime. She lies next to you, warm, soft, silent, and yet part of you knows this moment is not peace, it's polarity. She's not angry, but she's watching, feeling, tuning in to your energy like an invisible sonar. And right now, she's trying to detect something you don't even know you're transmitting. That's the paradox of attraction most men never understand. She doesn't need you to explain yourself. She needs to feel you, and what she's feeling. Tonight, every night, is not your love, not your loyalty, but your center, your polarity, your weight in the world, because the feminine doesn't crave sweetness. It doesn't crave logic. It doesn't even crave words. It craves opposition. And tonight you understand what that truly means. Let's rip the band-aid off. She doesn't want emotional equality. She wants energetic polarity. That means you're calm when she's chaos, your structure when she's storm, your direction when she's doubt. Polarity is what creates sexual electricity. Without it, you're roommates, not lovers. And no matter how emotionally open you are, no matter how much you communicate, if you don't embody polarity, she dries up, emotionally, sexually, spiritually. It's not personal, it's physics. Masculine and feminine are like magnetic fields. They need tension, they need difference, they need charge. And the moment you collapse into her emotions, mirror her tone, match her chaos, seek her validation, you invert the poles. She becomes the grounded one. You become the storm, and her body rejects it. Not because you're weak, because you've broken the primal pattern that attraction is built on. You've become energetically interchangeable, and that kills desire faster than anything. Let's bring in the Stoics one more time. They never used the words masculine or feminine, but they lived in deep, energetic polarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote not as a man trying to please, but as a man trying to contain, to order, to stabilize the kingdom within himself, so he could stabilize the one around him. That's masculine polarity, and women feel it instantly. They don't always understand it. They may even resist it, but they respect it. So tonight, you take inventory of how you've been showing up. Have you been matching her mood, or leading the energy? Have you been chasing her validation, or directing the tone of the room? Have you been explaining your feelings, or holding your emotional frame while hers fluctuates? Because here's the secret. She doesn't want you to be sensitive. She wants you to be sensing. She wants a man who senses her chaos, holds it without flinching, and makes decisions from stillness. That's polarity. It doesn't mean you dominate. It means you anchor. You lead with your nervous system, with your breath, with your presence. That's what makes her lean in. That's what makes her melt. That's what makes her say things like, I don't know why, but I just trust you. Because on a deep animal level, she does. You're no longer reactive. You're architectural. You're the building she enters to escape the storm. And here's a mainstream psychological concept to support this co-regulation. It means two people in relationship constantly affect each other's emotional states. But in every pairing, one person becomes the emotional regulator. Guess who she wants that to be? You. Not because she can't regulate herself, but because when you can, her body relaxes, her feminine opens, because she feels safe enough to surrender. But if you're the one always reacting, always spiraling, always seeking emotional rescue, she shuts down. She doesn't even mean to. Her body just stops responding. She goes cold, withdrawn, irritable. And you think, why is she acting like this? But her body is saying, I can't follow where there is no leader. Now let me be clear. This is not about being stoic to the point of disconnection. This is about being so grounded in your masculine essence that her feminine has no choice but to bloom. Here's a quirky example. Spartans used to train boys not just in combat, but in energy control. A Spartan boy had to remain calm, even while being whipped in public rituals. Why? Because composure was seen as sexual power. Self-mastery was magnetism. And in a way, women still test for that. Not consciously, but biologically. They test to see if your energy collapses when challenged. If it does, you're a peer. If it doesn't, you're a pole. And polarity is what draws her closer. You don't need to fix her feelings. You don't need to agree with her moods. You don't need to chase her validation. You just need to stand still, breathe deep, remain aware, and hold the masculine line. Because when you do, she softens, not because you convinced her, but because you gave her the one thing no emotionally reactive man ever can. Polarity with presence. That's not coldness. That's control. That's what builds devotion. And once she feels that, she'll stop fighting for power, because she'll finally feel safe surrendering to yours. You're walking down the street, a message buzzes in your phone. It's her. She's short, distant, clipped. You reread it 3 times, trying to decode the tone. Sure, do whatever. That's not how she used to text. Your chest tightens, your thumb hovers. Should you reply with warmth, defensiveness? Should you clarify, ask what's wrong? No. Tonight, you don't reply at all. Not yet, because tonight, you face the real demon. Most men never name. The father wound. That deep, buried ache. The one that trained you to respond instantly to emotional threat. The one that made you into a boy who chases approval instead of a man who holds presence. Your reactivity. It's not just hormones. It's history. It's pain. It's fear. It's abandonment. It's the echo of being unseen, unheard, unheld. You weren't born with that panic when a woman pulls away. It was installed. And now, you uninstall it. Slowly. With awareness. Because for most men, the emotional collapse we feel in relationships isn't about her. It's about him. The father. The unavailable one. The absent one. The critical one. The one who never taught you how to hold your emotions. Because he didn't hold his. And so now, when a woman turns cold, your body doesn't respond like a king. It responds like a boy. A boy who once tried to get dad to stay. A boy who thought love was earned through performance. A boy who panics at withdrawal and thinks silence means punishment. But you're not that boy anymore. Tonight, you return to yourself. You sit with the urge to fix, to explain, to chase, and you don't move. Because you're not trying to win her anymore. You're trying to liberate yourself from the ghost of your father. The ghost that whispers, you better say something, or they'll leave you. The ghost that says, be a good boy, and she'll come back. But you're not playing that role anymore. You're writing a new one. And in this new role, you let people leave, not out of spite, out of sovereignty. You don't win love by scrambling for it. You attract it by anchoring your worth in something deeper than someone else's attention. Let's bring in the Stoics again. Marcus Aurelius said, look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up, if you will ever dig. He wasn't talking about confidence affirmations. He was talking about excavating your pain, not to drown in it, but to find the core beneath it. And what you find is rage. Not the kind that shouts, the kind that simmers, that waits. That silent scream of a boy who never felt fully chosen. That's what explodes when she pulls away. That's what cries when she says, I need space. That's what flares when she ignores your message for 5 hours and still posts stories online. And tonight, you let it burn, but you don't act on it. You sit in it, you breathe into it. You feel the weight of generational abandonment in your bones, and you say, I see you, I honor you, but I don't serve you anymore, because you're done reacting like the boy. Now you're moving like the man. And the man, he's not afraid of distance. He doesn't take silence personally. He doesn't spiral when the feminine withdraws, because he doesn't collapse into emotional survival mode anymore. He stays grounded. He stays sovereign. He stays still. Here's a mainstream psychological truth. The attachment wounds formed in childhood often resurface most intensely in romantic relationships. That's because romantic intimacy reactivates our earliest templates of safety, or lack of it. But knowing this is power, because now you understand that text she sent wasn't an attack. It was an activation, an echo, and your job isn't to win her back. It's to respond to the boy inside you who still thinks love is performance. You don't soothe him by chasing her. You soothe him by staying present, staying still, staying sovereign. And here's the quirky part. When you stop chasing validation, the very thing you feared losing often returns. Not because you begged, but because your stillness became magnetic. Women feel it. The shift, the absence of emotional hunger, the presence of quiet self-approval. They can't name it, but they trust it. And if they're healthy, They lean in. If they're not, they flee. And both outcomes serve your healing, because now you're no longer driven by the need to fix her perception of you. You're no longer apologizing for being imperfect. You're no longer trying to earn what's freely given. You're building something far more powerful than attraction. You're building emotional credibility with yourself. You say, I can be misunderstood and still be worthy. I can be ignored and still be solid. I can feel pain and still be powerful. And when you embody that, when your nervous system becomes the father your inner boy never had, the game changes. You no longer react. You choose. You no longer chase. You allow. You no longer explain. You witness. That's emotional leadership. That's masculine healing. That's what she feels now, even through the phone. You're sitting in the car now, engine off, rain tapping gently on the windshield. The kind of weather that used to match your mood, grey, heavy, unresolved. She just stormed out. No kiss goodbye, no talk later, just a slammed door and silence. Old you would have chased her, sent 3 texts, replayed the argument in your head until it became a war you were sure you lost. But tonight, you do something different. You sit still and you realize you've reached a new milestone in this journey. You know when to walk away, without a word, not in anger, not in revenge, not to make a point, but because peace isn't something you fight for anymore. It's something you protect by leaving, when the energy no longer respects your presence. The Stoics would have called this apatheia, not apathy, but freedom from entanglement in the passions of others. You don't ignore her, out of spite. You remove yourself, because you refuse to argue with noise. You no longer need the last word. You don't need to be right. You don't even need closure. You just need yourself. And tonight, that's enough. This is where most modern men fail. They think walking away is weakness. That silence means defeat. But the truth, your absence is your sword, used only when necessary. And when it's drawn, everything changes. Because walking away doesn't mean abandoning her. It means refusing to abandon your self-respect. There's a moment every man must face. Am I staying because I want to, or because I'm afraid to leave? If the answer is fear, you walk, not because she's bad, but because staying would require you to betray your own center. That's not love. That's emotional servitude. And you don't serve moods anymore. You serve truth. Let's anchor this in psychology. There's a phenomenon called fawning, a trauma response where people appease others to avoid conflict. It's often mistaken for kindness, but it's fear, masked as compassion. And it kills attraction. She can smell it. When you stay after being disrespected, when you text after she insults you, when you apologize for things you didn't do, you think you're saving the relationship, but you're only confirming her subconscious suspicion. This man needs me more than he needs himself. And once she feels that, she loses respect, because she doesn't want a man who's emotionally obedient. She wants a man with direction. That's what walking away without a word communicates. Direction, clarity, boundaries. It says, I'm available for connection, but not at the cost of my dignity. And here's the wild part. When you do walk, she often returns. Why? Because your silence becomes a mirror. She sees her reflection in your absence. And if she's ready to grow, she will. If not, she leaves. And both paths are a gift. Because the man who knows when to leave is the man who never has to beg. He lets his actions speak, his distance preach, his absence instruct. And the woman who's meant to meet him at his level, she adjusts. Let's go back in time. The Stoics had a practice called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. They would visualize the worst-case scenario, not to suffer in advance, but to prepare their mind. So you ask yourself, what if she never comes back? And instead of spiraling, you breathe. You remind yourself, if she cannot respect my boundary, she is not qualified for my intimacy. You no longer chase compatibility. You observe it. You no longer chase connection. You create space for it. And if it doesn't fill that space, you don't panic. You remain. Let's add a quirky historical footnote. Epictetus, a former slave turned philosopher, once said, "If someone does not value your company, make them a gift of your absence. You're not punishing her, you're liberating yourself. And in doing so, you give her a chance to choose you without manipulation. You give her the space to rise, or the freedom to fall away. And in either case, you win, because you didn't collapse, you didn't argue, you didn't justify. You simply stood up and walked away, with stillness, with clarity, with power. And that power, it follows you into the next room, the next conversation, the next relationship, because it's no longer about winning the moment. It's about living in alignment. That means knowing when to speak and when to fall silent, when to hold and when to let go, when to stay and when to leave the room like a king. That's who you are now. A man who doesn't need to shout, slam doors, or storm out in flames. A man who doesn't abandon others, but refuses to abandon himself. And that's what makes her respect you, even as you walk away. You sit alone in your room, not sulking, not wounded, rebuilding, rewiring, because now you're doing what few men ever commit to: training your nervous system like a Roman general. No more white-knuckling your reactions. No more forcing calm through clenched jaws. You're learning how to be truly unshakable, not in theory, but in flesh and breath. And tonight, you start with your body, because here's what no one told you about emotional mastery. Your nervous system is your first battlefield, not your thoughts, not your beliefs. Your body, because it's your body that betrays you first. Tight jaw, raised shoulders, shallow breath, clenched fists, fluttering stomach. Before your brain has time to choose peace, your body has already signaled war. And if you don't learn to read those signals, you react on autopilot. You defend yourself before you're even attacked. You raise your voice before you've even asked a question. You send the text before you've cooled off. So tonight, we do what the Stoics did. We return to the discipline of the body. Marcus Aurelius woke every morning with a physical reminder. You are not here for comfort. You are here for function. His days began in the cold, in silence, in stillness, not because he enjoyed it, but because resilience is built through restraint. You're doing the same now. You close your eyes. You slow your breath. You scan your body like a tactician preparing for war. You notice the tightness in your chest. That's not random. That's a stored fight or flight pattern, passed down through generations of unprocessed male emotion. You notice your shallow breathing. That's anxiety masquerading as control. So you do what the Roman would have done. You breathe deeper, slower, wider, not to calm down, to take command. Let's bring in some science. Studies in somatic psychology show that the way you breathe tells your brain what's happening, even more than your thoughts do. If you breathe like a man under threat, your brain believes you're in danger, even if you're just sitting on your couch. But if you breathe like a king at rest, your brain recalibrates, your heart rate slows, your cortisol drops, your awareness sharpens. Now, you're no longer surviving the moment, you're leading it. Here's your practice from now on. Before you speak, take one deep, intentional breath through your nose. Relax your jaw. The tension there is where rage likes to hide. Lower your shoulders. Your body is not a battlefield. Drop your voice. Speak from your diaphragm, not your throat. Make eye contact, not to intimidate, but to anchor. This isn't about posture, it's about presence. Because when your body sends the signal, I am unmoved, the world begins to mirror you, especially her. You think she wants more words. She wants this calm gravity that she can't manipulate. This stillness that doesn't need to explain itself. This man whose nervous system is so deeply self-led that it leads her without effort. That's polarity. Again, but it's also power. The kind of power that doesn't roar. It breathes. Let's add a quirky layer. The ancient Stoics practiced something called ascorsis, rigorous daily routines to train the mind through the body. They took cold baths. They fasted. They slept on hard floors. They wore uncomfortable clothes. Why? To remind the body, you do not control me. That's what you're doing now. Modernized maybe, but the spirit is the same. Every time you choose stillness over flinching, you send a message to your entire psyche: we are safe, we are sovereign, we respond, we do not react. And this reconditions everything: your relationship, your business, your confidence, because men who react lose deals, men who breathe win wars. And let's be clear, this isn't a one-time fix, it's a daily practice. Some days you'll feel the heat rise, you'll want to yell, snap, shut down, but instead, you'll pause, just for 2 seconds. And in that pause, you will rewire the future, because emotional regulation is not a trait, it's a training regimen. And every time you win that tiny battle inside, you become someone new, someone she notices. Not because you're louder, because you're lighter. You're no longer dragging the panic of your childhood into every conversation. You're no longer carrying your father's voice into her arms. You're no longer flinching when she tests your strength, because now, you know where your strength lives: in your posture, in your breath, in your refusal to rush, and most of all, in your nervous system, the new kingdom you've finally begun to rule. It's a quiet afternoon. No texts, no tension, no drama, just the hum of normal life. You're sipping coffee, watching the clouds drift across the window, and for the first time in years, you're not bracing for impact. You're just here, and it hits you. Real power doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like boredom. You expected confidence to feel electric. You thought self-mastery would feel intense, like a surge of victory after winning an argument or conquering a battle. But no, it feels like a quiet room with no one to impress. It feels like choosing not to respond and not needing a medal for it. It feels like peace, and peace, at first, can feel incredibly dull. That's because you've been addicted to chaos, to emotional turbulence, to passion that's really just volatility, to relationships that keep you hooked through highs and lows, dopamine and despair. You mistook the roller coaster for love. But now, you're stepping off, and at first it feels empty. No drama to analyze, no emotional battlefield to march across, just a steady, rhythmic quiet. But this is what the Stoics knew. Tranquility is not the absence of emotion, it is the mastery of it. Epictetus. This isn't numbness, it's neutrality. And in that neutrality, you find your new default. You're not a hero in a war anymore. You're a monk building his kingdom, brick by quiet brick. You've lost your taste for reaction. You no longer need to dissect every message. You don't obsess over her tone. You don't spiral over what she meant by that thing she said last night. You trust your perception now, and more importantly, you trust your boundaries. If she crosses them, you'll walk. No ceremony, no rage, no essay-length texts, just movement. Because emotional control isn't just about staying calm, it's about knowing when silence is enough. And when you settle into this stillness long enough, something begins to bloom inside you. True discernment. Not judgment, not pride, not superiority, just clarity. You start to see her differently. You no longer see her through the lens of longing. You see her through the lens of alignment. Does her energy match your peace? Does her behavior match your standards? Does her presence feed or drain your mission? These questions become quiet filters in the background of your mind, not loud alarms. Because the man who's regulated doesn't force decisions. He allows reality to guide them. And sometimes reality says, this one doesn't match your silence. This one thrives on friction. This one isn't ready for what you've become. And instead of grieving that, you bow to it. You don't mourn every misalignment. You release it, because now you're not looking for someone to fill your empty spaces. You're looking for someone who can hold their own center while you hold yours. That's the new intimacy. Two regulated nervous systems, two sovereign beings. No trauma ping pong, no emotional codependency, no spiritual tug of war, just resonance. That's what the Stoics would have called virtue. Not moralism, but energetic congruence. The alignment of your actions with your inner code. You're living that code now. And yes, some days, it will feel boring. That's okay. Because you're not here for excitement. You're here for excellence. Excellence in how you carry yourself. Excellence in how you treat her, even when she's testing you. Excellence in how you exit when respect is lost. And most of all, excellence in how you meet your emotions. With curiosity, not shame. With stillness, not spin. With power, not panic. Here's something most psychologists don't talk about. True emotional mastery often feels like nothing, because there's no surge, no dramatic tension release, no aha moment. Just the slow, steady disappearance of noise. You don't get triggered as often. You don't feel the need to explain everything. You don't start fights just to feel something. And your relationships, they get quieter too. Less spectacle, more substance. Less fire, more gravity. And ironically, that's when she starts to lean in again. Because the chaos she once created to test your strength, she no longer needs it. You've shown her, this is what stillness looks like. This is what a man sounds like when he's no longer addicted to being understood. This is what safety feels like. And she either grows to meet it, or fades into her own drama. Either way, you remain calm, composed, complete. Because real power isn't loud. It's boring. Until you realize boring is just another word for peace. Your body isn't used to yet. You stand in front of the mirror, not to admire, not to criticize, just to witness. The man looking back isn't perfect, but he's solid, grounded, quiet in a way that feels heavy, not hollow. And for the first time, you don't feel the need to explain him to anyone. Not to her, not to your past, not even to yourself. Because tonight, you finally understand the truth that has taken you thousands of emotional miles to reach. You're not cold, you're controlled. There's a difference. Cold is a defense mechanism. Cold is numb. Cold pushes love away and builds walls no one can climb. But controlled is presence. Controlled is self-honoring. Controlled is the kind of man whose silence creates gravity. You're not withholding emotion. You're deciding what to share and when. You're not afraid to feel. You've just outgrown the need to perform your feelings for validation. That's the shift. And women feel it instantly. Because the man who used to chase every mood, every tear, every moment of withdrawal, has now become the man who simply observes. She tests. You breathe. She withdraws. You remain. She throws words like daggers. You smile, not to mock, but because you know those daggers can't cut what they no longer reach. Your center, your internal authority. You now understand what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "Be like the rock against which the waves crash, but which stands firm and tames the fury of the water." The rock isn't angry, it isn't reactive, it doesn't flex, it simply remains. And now, so do you. Because self-control is no longer something you force. It's who you are. You no longer chase closure. You embody completion. You no longer chase connection. You offer calm. You no longer need her energy to feel like a man. You bring your own energy into the room. You bring masculine depth. You bring silence that commands presence. You bring breath that slows her pulse. You bring posture that anchors conversations. You bring your nervous system, trained like a monk, layered like a warrior, precise like a king. And here's the paradox she feels when she's near you. You're emotionally rich, but energetically untouchable. She can scream, and you don't flinch. She can cry, and you don't collapse. She can leave, and you don't chase. And yet, when she softens, you're still there, steady, available, unapologetically calm. And this is what flips the script. This is what makes her lean in again. This is what makes her say, "I don't know what it is about you lately, but I feel safe." Because women don't want emotional exposure, they want emotional architecture. A man whose stillness doesn't judge her storm, A man whose silence isn't distance, but depth. A man who isn't ruled by anger, but commands it like a blade he never needs to draw. And in your presence, she stops testing. She starts trusting. Not because you convinced her, but because you stopped reacting and started reigning. That's the final evolution of your emotional journey. You are no longer the boy waiting to be chosen. You are no longer the man begging to be understood. You are no longer the lover leaking need into every conversation. You are the mountain. And now, you don't need her to stay. You just need to stay with yourself, because you've realized the only validation that matters is how quiet your soul feels in your own presence. And right now, it's very quiet. So now, you exhale. Not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. You've sat through your storm, felt it without exploding, watched the fire rage through your chest without running into the forest to scream. And that's the real victory. No medals, no fanfare, just a room lit by quiet, a breath that no longer trembles, a heart that no longer sprints every time she pulls away. You don't crave chaos anymore. You don't need the high of emotional combustion to feel alive. You've traded the heat of reaction for the calm of knowing. You've become still, heavy, magnetic. And though it may not always be exciting, it's yours. So rest now, knowing you've taken the first real step toward becoming the man she respects, not because of your control over her, but because of your unshakable control over yourself. Let your nervous system ease into sleep. Let your body remember what safety feels like when you stop chasing approval. Let your silence become your sanctuary. You're not cold. You're just done bleeding energy into places that never filled you. And from that stillness, everything real will find you, even her. Good night, brother.